All right, so you're moving to the Atlanta, Georgia area from Canada, but there's one problem. You have no idea what to expect. Well, this video is made just for you. I'm going to talk about cost of living, lifestyle, weather, and so much more. This is going to be everything you need to know about moving to Atlanta from Canada, and it's coming up right now. Hey everyone, welcome back to Living in Atlanta. This YouTube channel is all about helping you get to know what it's like to live in the Atlanta, Georgia area. My name is Mark Brenner. I'm a realtor here in Atlanta, and I have helped multiple people relocate to this area from Canada. So I thought it'd be a great opportunity to make a video for our friends in the North so that they can really understand what life will be like living in the Atlanta, Georgia area. It's very different. I know just coming from the Northeast in America, it was very different. So coming from Canada, it is a bit of a culture shock. There are some differences. We are going to talk about all the most important things that you should know moving to the Atlanta area from Canada. So let's get right into it. Hey, real quick, before we get into the details, I am a licensed realtor in Atlanta and I love working with my viewers. So if you are coming from Canada, you're looking to purchase a home anywhere in the Atlanta area, I've got you covered. You can book a Zoom call with me. Just use the link in the description below. You can call me, text me, whatever you want to do, but I love turning my viewers into clients. All right, so moving to the Atlanta, Georgia area, especially from Canada, can be a huge culture shock. It is a very different area. So this video is going to be your ultimate resource for what to expect. Definitely save it and come back to it over time. Now, first things first, let's pull up a map and look at exactly where Atlanta, Georgia is in the US and talk about some geographically important items here. All right, so where in the world is Atlanta, Georgia? We have a map of the US pulled up. We have Georgia in the southeast here, of course, the Bible Belt right above Florida. And let's look at where Atlanta is. First thing to note, you're going to be pretty far from the ocean, which you're probably used to as a Canadian, but this is not a good town if you like to be close to the beach. Savannah is a few hours away, so there is the opportunity there, but it's going to be more of a vacation thing, not a thing that you can enjoy every day. As we zoom in, you can see Atlanta is basically in the center to the north, slightly west of the state of Georgia, and you can see here, this is officially the city of Atlanta, but really for people here, we use this circle here, which is the Interstate 285, and you're kind of in town here or out of town here. So ITP inside the perimeter or OTP outside the perimeter. Okay, so that's just to help you with the framework of being in town versus being in one of the suburbs. Now the airport, Hartsfield-Jackson, is located in South Atlanta. It's located in College Park. So that is the airport that you'll likely be flying into. And honestly, it's a great amenity to have. It's one of the busiest airports in the world. It's a Delta hub, so you can get a lot of direct flights, not only in country, but to out-of-country destinations as well. Now, Atlanta, Georgia is a very green space. We are a city in the forest, so you will notice just all the greenery, the trees, the green spaces, and the public parks when you live here. And as you head north, that's where you run into the mountains. So Georgia is not a terribly mountainous state. It's definitely not nearly as flat as, say, a Texas, but it's not as mountainous as the Pacific Northwest. So you're going to have, the Appalachian Trail come into the north part of Georgia. You're going to have the Blue Ridge Mountains in northern Georgia. So you definitely have mountainous areas in northern Georgia. Beautiful nature up here, Chattahoochee-Oconee National Forests. And as you get south, it's beautiful down there too, but it's just going to be a little different. So definitely a city in a bunch of incredible nature and green spaces here. So if you're an outdoors enthusiast, this should be a great location for you to live as well. Now, of course, like Canada, the US is a huge country, so to get to other states, other cities is not going to be easy. I would say typically Atlantans travel to Florida most often. Alabama's not too far away. Now for me, I go to the Carolinas and Tennessee quite a bit for kayaking. It's only about a 2-hour ride into Tennessee, 2 hours into North or South Carolina. So you definitely can enjoy all the wonderful nature that the Carolinas and Tennessee or Alabama or even Florida has to offer here. So that is where Atlanta, Georgia is. All right, so we covered some of the geography and location information. Let's talk about weather. Obviously, that's going to be very important for you. What can you expect as a Canadian in terms of weather in Atlanta throughout the year? Well, I think you'll find the climate extremely mild depending on where you're coming from in Canada. Now, we do have 4 distinct seasons here. So it is not like Southern California or Florida where it is warm and sunny all year round. Personally, I think it's the best of all worlds. So you are going to have a prolonged hot, and very humid summer. It is not a dry heat like on the West Coast. It is very humid during the summertime in the Atlanta area, so just be prepared for that. Now, the winter will be a complete joke to you, I promise. It very rarely even gets below freezing in Atlanta. Maybe 2 to 3 times a year during the winter, it will even get below freezing. And we have little to no snow. For instance, this past year, 2022, I don't even think it flurried. We might have had a little bit of flurries once, but we are talking like almost zero snowfall. In some of our worst years, we might get 2 to 3 inches. Now, in terms of spring and fall, to me, they're absolutely perfect. Sunny, cool, in the 70-degree range. Spring and fall are going to be absolutely gorgeous here. So to recap, you have a prolonged, hot, humid, and sunny summer. You have a short, rainy, and kind of cold winter. And you have an absolutely perfect spring and fall season. Overall, you have 4 distinct seasons, a mild climate, and a ton of sunshine. All right, let's move right on to your cost of living. What is it going to cost you to purchase a home here or to rent? Well, luckily coming from Canada, I think you'll find our real estate prices here very affordable, even though they have risen quite a bit over the last few years. So the median home price in the Atlanta area is about $400,000 for a single family home. Now that would typically be a 3-2, 1,500 square feet or more, but that is going to be highly variable to the area we're talking about. Atlanta is a big place. Your dollar is going to go further in some areas than others. But let's talk in broad strokes real quick, okay? If you have a $400,000 budget and you want to be inside the perimeter, you want to be in town, you're going to have maybe a smaller ranch home that's move-in ready with some updates, but not a ton. Now the area is a little further away from the city of Atlanta, where the public schools tend to be a little bit better. You are going to need a little bit more of a budget. If you have a family, you might need more space, but if you want to be in areas with good public schools, I think $400,000 is a good starter budget, but you're going to need a little bit more if you need a larger, more updated home, so keep that in mind. Now, what about rent? Maybe you're going to rent to start here, or maybe you're just going to rent permanently here. I would say the average rent here is about $1,600. Now, if you only need one bed or a studio, you can certainly get something for much less than $1,600. You know, you can rent a 1-1 in Buckhead for $1,200 or $1,300. It's a very nice area with a lot to do, but you're going to have a small space. Now, if you're a family and you want to rent a single family detached home, which is definitely an option for you, I would say you're going to want to have a budget of at least $1,800 a month. Anywhere between $1,800 a month to $3,000 a month, you can rent a very nice move-in ready home in a good area. Now, if you want more detail on the cost of living in Atlanta, Georgia, I filmed an entire video going through groceries and transportation and all that stuff. So I'm not going to do it here, but I'll link that video so you can go check it out. All right, but where should you live in the Atlanta, Georgia area? This is one of the biggest questions you'll need to answer because there's a lot of great places to live. There are a lot of places in and around Atlanta that could check all of your boxes, right? So you have to understand what's most important to you and work backwards from that. Now, the number one thing to help you determine where you need to live is going to be your commute. The traffic in the Atlanta area is really bad. So you don't want to be, 30 plus miles away from the place that you commute to every day. So if you have any opportunity to figure out where you'll be working, or if there's anywhere that you need to be a certain distance from, whether it's family or your favorite thing to do, work backwards from a radius from that destination. Because the traffic is crazy here, you do need to own a car, so you want to be close to the things that you commute to the most often. Now, another great way to determine where you need to be is if public schools are important to you. If the quality of the public schools is important because you have children that will be attending those schools, well, there are some areas that typically have better grades for public schools. Now, I am not going to comment on the quality of schools. I'm not going to give you my opinion on what schools are good or bad, but I will provide a resource in this video that you can use when you're looking at places in Atlanta. You look at the school assignments and you can look at the grade that the state of Georgia gives that school. And just to give you some broad strokes based on those grades, the counties that typically have the highest grades from this website are counties like Forsyth County, Cherokee County, North Fulton County, Cobb County, and to some degree, Gwinnett County. Now, Atlanta Public Schools, which is the school system for the actual city of Atlanta, I would say is a mixed bag in terms of the grades it gets from the government of Georgia. I think you can get a great education in many areas of the Atlanta Public School District, but it is a mixed bag, so you want to be utilizing the website I'm providing. Now, the third question you can ask yourself is, what is the vibe that you're looking for, okay? We talked about commute, we talked about schools, but All other things being equal, do you want to be in the city? Do you want real city living with a lot of fun things to do right at your fingertips? If so, we're going to want to recommend that you're inside the perimeter and in one of the trendier neighborhoods that maybe has some walkability and a lot of things to do. If you like more of a suburban feel, obviously we're going to be looking more in the outer suburbs of Atlanta. We'll keep your commute in mind, but it's going to come down to, do you care how close to the city you are? If you don't, you're going to have more options. And of course, you might be looking for something very rural, and it gets rural pretty easily in Georgia. We don't have to go that far out to not have a nice rural vibe. So understanding what type of atmosphere you're looking for, whether you like city, suburban, or rural life, will really help cross some places off the list and help you focus on the areas that'll work best for you and your family. But before we finish on this topic, let's pull up the map again really quick so that I can talk about just some of the broad strokes, just so you get a feel for the area and what is true typically in terms of like income and schools and things you should know when looking at a map of the Atlanta area. Let's go check it out. All right, so we're back looking at the map of Atlanta again. I think the map is really helpful just to give you a visual idea of how to understand the city. Okay, again, I talked about, there's so many great places to live around the Atlanta area, okay? If you want to be more in town, again, you're going to be ITP. If you want to be suburban, you're going to be somewhere around here. If you want to be rural, you're going to start getting out way more out here more, but there are a lot of great places to live here. So just generally speaking, for whatever reason, just to break it down for you a little bit, a lot of the money is situated in North Atlanta, okay? A lot of the high income, quality public schools are located on the north side of Atlanta. Some of the most popular suburbs of the city would be Alpharetta, Johns Creek, Milton, Kennesaw, Marietta, Sandy Springs. So this is where it's definitely popular areas for families. This is where some of the best public schools tend to be, some of the safer areas. I am not telling you there are not wonderful places to live all to the west, to the south, to the east. There absolutely are. For instance, Fayetteville, Peachtree City, very desirable places to live, safe, good schools. And there's places like that all around Atlanta. So I'm just trying to give you some broad strokes. But listen, there's so many great places to live around Atlanta. Of course, you want to pay attention to your proximity to the highways because that's going to have a major impact on your commute. So looking how close you are to 85, how close you are to 20. Now, if you're on the south side of the city, you're going to have an advantage by being closer to the airport. If you're on the north side of the city, you're going to have an advantage of having a head start in the North Georgia nature and mountains that they have to offer. Now, typically on the west side and the east side, it can get rural pretty quick, especially on the west side. As you start going out west towards Villa Rica, there's just more space. Your dollar's going to go further. It's definitely more rural living. Heading east, there's all these suburbs that are really popular, but again, if you keep going east, it's going to get more and more rural. So it's really important to talk with a professional here and figure out what your needs are, and then what areas will work best for what your needs are. You're going to want to work backwards from your commute, whether or not you need good quality public schools, and overall just what kind of atmosphere you want to live in. Do you want to be in the city? Do you want to be in the suburbs? Or do you want to be in the rural areas? So those are just a few broad strokes about the Atlanta area. All right, so I hope that was helpful just to give you some broad strokes information about the Atlanta area. Remember, there are great places to live all over the Atlanta area, so it's really important to discuss with a professional here to look at what's important to you and your family and what areas are going to serve those needs best. All right, so we've covered a lot already. We've covered weather, cost of living, areas that you should focus on, how to figure out where you might want to live. Let's talk about some of the biggest differences moving from Canada to the US, just in terms of lifestyle as a Canadian. What is going to be some of the biggest differences that you experience? I've compiled a list based on, my experience with Canadian clients and my knowledge of how different it is to live there. I'm not from Canada, so I'm sure I may have missed some things, but these are some of the most important things you should consider. Number one, Canada typically is more culturally diverse than the United States. You have a 23% higher migration rate. So oftentimes in Canada, you're exposed to way more different types of culture. Now, don't get me wrong, Atlanta, Georgia is very diverse. We have a lot of different types of cultures here, but you probably won't see the level of diversity here that you see currently in Canada. Second, there's just way more people in the US, right? So, you might come from a big metropolis in Canada, but you also might not. And so I think one of the big differences, moving to the Atlanta area is just the sheer amount of people. Now, it's not going to be like New York City, which is incredibly dense and you feel close to a cajillion other people. It's not like that in Atlanta. Atlanta is sprawled out, right? You need to own a car here. Everything is sprawled out, but there's a lot of people here, so that might be a little bit of a shock for you. Now, another reality is people are just not as polite down here. That's going to vary quite a bit on the part of the US that we're talking about. Now, listen, Atlantans are not rude, right? No one's going to be outright rude to you, but there's not that same level of connection as I think many Canadians have, just making small talk with a stranger, smiling at people, or even staring at people, I don't think is as rude in Canada as it is in the US. So just be prepared. It's probably going to be a little less polite than what you're used to. Now, the next one I have is there's really no hockey, especially in Atlanta. In fact, we don't even have a professional hockey team anymore. They packed up and left a few years ago. So I know hockey is beloved in Canada. Unfortunately, you're not going to get your hockey fix here in Atlanta, Georgia. Now, the next one I have is guns. I know that gun control laws are way stricter in Canada. In Georgia, they're much more lax. So you may see way more people carrying guns in public than what you're used to in Canada. It's very common for people to own guns here. There's a very strong gun culture, shooting ranges, and all that stuff. So it was a shock for me coming from the Northeast where there are tighter gun control laws and a lot of people I grew up with didn't own guns. So I would imagine for a Canadian, that might be a little bit of a shock. Now, another surprise for you might be the cost of flying domestically. I know flying domestically in Canada gets very expensive. It's not that expensive in the US, and not only do you have Hartsfield-Jackson in Atlanta, which is one of the busiest airports in the world, it's also a Delta hub. So the Atlanta airport is an area where you can get places all over the world and sometimes without making connections. So it should be easier and more affordable for you to do domestic flights living in Atlanta than it would be for you as a Canadian. Next one I have is, of course, there's no metric system here, so you will have to adapt to our system. We don't use the metric system for anything, but you probably knew that already. The next one I have, I don't totally know if this is true, but I would expect you're going to have less exotic meats than you're used to in Canada. I know that, all kinds of different fowl and meats and organ meat are really popular in Canada. I think you can find many of those things here, especially in some of the farmers markets, some of the foreign markets that we have here. But I would just say in general, you might not have some of the exotic meats and some of the comfort foods. Obviously, maple syrup isn't as prevalent here. So that's the case when you move anywhere, right? You don't have some of the comfort foods that you grew up with. So I would just be prepared for that. And the last one I have here is just individualism. And I don't know, that can be hard to put into words, but you probably already know this. Americans, for whatever reason, just how the country was formed, how people are raised here, we're very individualistic, okay? We don't have that same sense of like for the greater good, I think, like Canadians do. It's very much like, let me do my own thing, do not intrude, do not bother me. I want freedom to live my life the way that I want without anyone saying anything about it. Now, of course, that isn't the case with all things here in America, but I would imagine someone coming from Canada would notice that in many ways, that individualistic nature for Americans shows up in terms of the lifestyle, so I would be prepared for that. All right, so there you have it. Moving to Atlanta, Georgia from Canada. I covered a lot of the most important things that you're going to need to consider to make this move. Ultimately, I think you'll really enjoy it. The nature here is fantastic. It's a great climate. You really don't have to worry about natural disasters. There's a ton of opportunity. We have a very diverse economy in Atlanta, and the cost of living is probably going to be better than wherever you're coming from in Canada. So I really hope that helped. I hope that provided you some value and got you excited about living in the Atlanta, Georgia area. Again, I've helped multiple people move here and buy homes here in the Atlanta area from Canada. So if you do need help doing that, don't hesitate to reach out. Oh, one more item. Actually, this is very important, and hopefully you're still watching. But in terms of purchasing a home and getting approved for a home loan, you need to understand that credit in the US is going to be one of the most important things that you need to consider. So if you have any opportunity to open a line of credit in the States and build up some credit history as soon as possible, that is going to save you a lot of time. Otherwise, you're going to have to move to the US and start to build up credit over a 2-year period of time here. So that's probably my best tip for those of you who do want to purchase a home in America. If you don't already, start finding a way, whether it's a credit card or some kind of bank account where you can start building credit in the US if possible. So there you have it. That's what you need to know moving from Canada to the Atlanta, Georgia area. I really hope that helped. Reach out if you need anything at all. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.